Welcome to Dialed MTB. We're here with the full review of the 2024 Revel Rascal V2, and pretty stoked to get into this bike. We'll just kind of talk about it a little bit real quick, and then go into the specs and the geometry, and then get into the ride impressions on the trail. So first off, this bike, I talk about it quite a bit while I'm on the trail, but it did take me a few rides to get the suspension all dialed in, which that's nothing out of the ordinary today with bikes. Like, to get specific suspension just perfect for you, it might take a few rides, so not a big deal right there. But let's talk about the build real quick. This is at base price. This is $79.99, so $8,000. It does have the carbon wheels with the Industry 9 Hydra hubs on it. This one is, like I said, $8,000 base with the aluminum Industry 9 wheels, which is those wheels you don't need to upgrade. They're super good. But this is the RochShox Lyric Ultimate up front, the Super Deluxe Ultimate rear, which I really like that spec on a 130, 140 millimeter, 29-inch trail bike. I am glad that they didn't put a Pike or a 34 or something that just takes away from the front end feel of this bike. So, and then also with this, the Super Deluxe Ultimate is just an amazing rear shock. So stoked to see that on a trail bike. It's probably about a half a pound heavier than their inline shock without this piggyback, but it's worth it. So other really cool things that they did, it's not an ordinary spec. So it comes with Continental tires and Trail One components up front. I will say the Trail One stem, I would never go spend my own money on that. It doesn't look the coolest, but it's different, which is cool. So I like that part. Trail One bars are carbon bars, so that's fine. And then the Trail One grips, that was one thing that that I would swap out pretty quick because they weren't the most. Grips are such a specific thing, and they're only $30 pretty much across the board. So you get the grips that you like. If these grips work for you, perfect. But almost any bike that you buy, you might not like the grips on, so it's not a big deal. But let's talk about the dropper next. Bike yoke dropper. Love the bike yoke dropper. It comes with Code RSC brakes, which I'm glad to see codes on a bike like this because this bike is very capable. But I'm not the biggest fan of SRAM brakes in general. If you've been following my channel at all, you know that. But yeah, we don't spend much time on that, but the codes are good to see on this bike, especially with the HS2 rotors. That is a big upgrade to SRAM brakes, so cool to see that they're including that on these bikes. Back to the tires real quick. These are the Continental. This is the Endurance compound, and it's like their least grippy compound, the one that lasts the longest, which is cool, but maybe I wish that Revel would have just put the Endurance compound in the rear if they wanted to make it last longer and then put the soft compound up front. I noticed here in our really loose trails here in Boise, Idaho, that the front is just, it didn't quite have enough grip. There was a time like I washed out because I just lost grip. And if I would have had that soft compound or ultra soft or whatever Continental call, or my normal setup of Schwalbe with the soft in the rear and ultra soft up front, or Maxxis with Max Terra in the back and Max Grip in the front, I know that I wouldn't have washed out. It was just literally like I had no grip on that front end because it just washed out. But anyways, that's all my fault. But yeah, overall super rad spec that Revel's doing. And this color, when it hits the sun, we're not in the sun, but when this color hits the sun, it is so cool. It has this like glitter flake in it, and the purple really shines. When it's dusty though, like it literally looks like a black bike. So if you're into black, don't be fazed by the purple or Pinot wine color that they are calling it, because once it gets dirty, it looks black. Other than that, let's get into some geometry numbers. All right, so let's start with head tube angle, 65.5 degrees. Right in there with all the main trail bikes now, so I had no complaints about that. On a trail bike, I really like 65 to 65.5. And like I said, that's right in it, so perfect. The chainstay length is 436 millimeters across the entire line of bikes. This is a size medium. I'm just barely over 5'8", and this has a 451 millimeter reach with a 76-degree effective seat tube angle. The 76-degree effective seat tube angle is across all sizes, and then extra large and extra large gets a little bit steeper, which I wish this seat tube angle effective was a little bit steeper. I wish it was in that like 77-degree range instead of 76. Because when I was climbing every once in a while, I felt like it was I was just hanging off the back a little bit. I had to have this seat post up pretty high. That's one other thing. I wish that the medium did come with a longer seat post. But anyways, that's small little things. It'll only be at 25 millimeters longer. All right, so let's talk about wheelbases now. Got a drink, so it should be good to go. Anyways, 1198 on this size medium. I think it's about 22 to 25 millimeters ish in that range, going down to the small and then up to the large and extra large, difference in sizes. And then same with the reach. I don't think I covered that. It's about a 20 millimeter difference between the small. It goes down to 431, large goes to 471, and then once you go to that extra large and extra large, it changes a little bit more. It gets a little bit longer each size, which that's cool that they have an extra large that is such a big bike for someone that comes in that's 6'6" or 6'8" or whatever, and they come in because I used to sell bikes, and you'd get these tall people coming in, and you're like, I've got an extra large, and I feel like you're going to be kind of cramped on it. So it's really cool that Revel spent the extra money. They're probably not going to make that much on it, but that's really cool that they're doing that. So overall, they nailed a lot of the geometry on this bike, and there's not really any complaints from me, except for I wish the seat tube angle was a tiny bit steeper. But other than that, like, you're really not going to notice too much. So let's get out on the trail, do a little bit of riding, and then we'll come back and talk about some climbing, and then get back on the trail and do more riding. All right, so before we get into how the bike rides, I want to say thank you to Revel for sending me this bike to do a review on and check it out and get you guys some information on it. So shout out to them. And now let's get to how this thing rides. All right, so this bike, I've been riding it for the last about 5 weeks, and it's gotten better and better every single time I ride it, which is super rad. Well, I guess not every time, because last few times I got the suspension super dialed in, and I've been keeping it where it's at because it's been working really good. So one thing with this, I would just say make sure you get the suspension dialed in at the beginning, and then it's going to take a few rides, but once you do, it's going to be pretty dang good. So yeah, super stoked about that so far. You back there. Okay. All right, we just came up on a big group. So let's see how this does. All right, yeah, this is the first time I've rode this trail this year, and that went down that really well, actually. But one thing that I am not stoked about, which I'll probably talk about this a couple times in this video, is the tire spec. It's a really hard compound from Continental, and that really just kind of, got soaked. Just kind of ruins this tire for me. It's really loose here in Boise, so you always go with like one of the grippiest front tires, at least for me, from my style of riding. So it's just kind of a bummer, but they'll probably last a while, I guess, so that's nice.
But yeah, super fun bike. You won't be disappointed in it. And they spec all their bikes really good, just like how they would spec it if they were riding it, I'm assuming. So whew, that's pretty cool.
All right, so let's talk about climbing on this bike. So it's not the fastest bike, it's not the slowest bike. When I first got on it, right after my Santa Cruz Tallboy, which I have that bike pretty dang light. I think it's about 26.5-ish pounds with pedals and everything on it. So it's set up to climb right now. I got on this and I was like, whoa, this is not as sprightly as I thought it would be going up the hill. So, but then I started looking at times. I know Strava isn't super accurate, but it wasn't crazy far off. I expected it to be like kind of closer to like a bigger bike, and it really wasn't. It was just, it's the CBF suspension is super efficient. It does not like bob at all. It's so just smooth. You're pedaling and there's no bouncing or anything, and it's really impressive. So hats off to Revel for using this design and it working so well on their bikes. But yeah, climbing, it's solid. It's not the worst climber in the category, and it's not the best, but it descends bigger than most of these bikes, which we get into later. So yeah, pretty rad overall. Not disappointed in the climbing capabilities at all. At first, I thought I would be, but then, like I talk about later, once again, we're kind of jumping forward. Or if you watched my first impressions video, which you should go check out, I'll put a link in the description below to go check that out. I talk about suspension a lot in that one. I ended up running 35% sag in the rear, and that did not mess with the climbing capabilities at all. So super cool that you can run that much sag on a 130mm trail bike, and it still is just super supportive, no bouncing on the climb. So hats off to CBF and Revel. So yeah, let's get back out on the trail and do some descending, which we all know is the fun stuff.
All right, so one thing with this bike that is kind of out of the ordinary for 130mm trail bikes is it jumps just fine, but like trying to like pop it up off of little things, it's just not quite as liftable, I guess, if that's the right term. It's just a little bit more planted, which is not a bad thing. It's a good thing in that way. And then just for like jumping and stuff and wanting to kind of just jump little things, it's not quite as active, I guess I'll say. So, but with that, I would say, even with this not soft compound tire in this super loose dirt we have here, it corners really good. So if I had a softer compound tire up front, this thing would be pretty freaking sick. So yeah, this is a motorcycle trail, so it's been completely washed out. All right, so this is the trail I rode on my first impressions video, and gotten the bike a little bit better since then, but not that much different. So I'm still been stoked with that 35% sag, and I just messed with the compression a little bit on both the fork and the rear shock, and it's feeling really good. So stoked about that. It is crazy loose here right now, so it's kind of sketchy. And this bike though does have, like, I think this suspension, I mean RochShox stuff does really good, but I'm just talking like the CBS suspension. I feel like it creates a decent amount of traction, more than what I expected, but that also might be because I have 35% sag, so it's just gripping, which is sweet. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this bike, and I think this is kind of the bike that is a little finicky with suspension, but man, when you get it set, it is ridiculously different than what it could be. So yeah, stoked. Revel did a sick job on this, and it's definitely a step above their last one, I think, in pretty much every single way. It's been a few years since I rode that one, but from what I remember, this one is pretty dang good. Like, it's exactly what you want a trail bike to be. Like, it's, I mean, sure, it could be a little bit lighter, but then that would take away from some of the other qualities, like that really planted, comfortable feeling that it has. I think it would kind of go away if it lost 2 or 3 pounds. So yeah, pretty rad. Oh yeah, just glides through that so smooth. Pretty rad. Definitely feels bigger than what my Santa Cruz Tallboy does. Not by a ton, but I'd say it's just that rear end feels a little plusher. So one thing with this bike, it really carries speed well. When you aren't using the brakes and you're just cruising, it like, it definitely does not slow down. So pretty rad. So if you have trails that are pretty fast and flowy and just like real smooth in the corners, you probably won't have to like use the brakes much or pedal much. So it's pretty dang fun on those types of trails. All right, here we go down Flow Trail. This bike is, I think this is kind of where this bike shines the most. It's pretty rad. It jumps well. It doesn't like get too crazy in the air. Like, I don't know, not too much English on it, but it's, for me at least, but it's fun. I mean, these like little flowy corners just stay super planted, and just really comfortable in the corners. And the jumps, it's just jumps nice and straight, super easy, so pretty rad. Very comfortable bike. But with that, like, not saying that's the best feature of this bike, because it's not, but it just, it's so, sorry about that, someone was stopped on the trail back there right on the bridge. But yeah, this bike is pretty dang fun. All right, here we go down Shake and Bake at Eagle Bike Park. So this one's a little bit rockier. It's all man-made rock stuff, but yeah. So yeah, through that little rock section, I intentionally like didn't jump it just to see if it would just soak all that stuff up, and it soaks it up all super well. So that's always nice for a 130 millimeter bike. That little drop, it's a couple feet. I know on GoPro it probably looks like 2 inches, but it's a couple feet, and it took that really well. It corners in those berms really nice, and I think that the cornering on this bike would be even better with some better tires. That little chunky section, super solid. Yeah, stoked on this thing. I think that this bike is a little bit deeper feeling than what the Santa Cruz Tallboy is. Not by a ton, but I'm talking like maybe 5%. Then what? That new high pivot Norco optic. That's definitely deeper feeling in the rear, but the front end actually feels a little bit more stable on this bike, and I think that has to do strictly with the spec, which is that RochShox Lyric instead of a Fox 34, which is on the optic. So yeah, it's kind of like right in the middle of all these bikes, and it feels really good. All right, so to wrap everything up, this bike climbs, I'd say, a little above average for the class, descends a little above average also. So it makes it worth it on the descent. So it's always good to have a bike that does that. And like I said, the spec that they put on the front end, that Lyric, just really ties this entire bike together. And the rear end, once you get that all dialed in, and you might have to mess with the clickers, don't be afraid, but also mark them to where you like them before you start just going crazy. Like, get a kind of a base thing and then start doing 1 or 2 clicks out on every ride. Because I did that and I found something that it just made the bike go from just from here all the way up here. And it was pretty dang impressive. And I want everyone that has this bike to go out and figure out that little magical extra touch that I found. So yeah, if you like this video, like and subscribe for more like this, and get out and ride.